Babies are born ready to communicate with the world. They're primed for social interaction and for the language of their family. They communicate from the moment they're born. And how they move from nonverbal communication to verbal communication depends a lot on their environment, including their family, their caregivers, and their opportunities for interaction. We also know that babies are listening to their parents even before they're born. If a parent reads the same book or sings the same song over and over to their baby, after the baby is born, if given a choice, the baby will prefer to listen to the story or song that they already know. They're learning about communication even before they're born. We can watch a newborn baby and see that she's ready to communicate. Very often, when a newborn hears her mom or dad, she'll turn toward their voice. She's already tuning in to conversation and listening intently. This is one way that she learns about the rules of her language, turn taking, the rise and fall of speech, which is called intonation, and in general, just how communication goes. Crying is one way that babies communicate a need as well. Some of the reasons that babies cry might be because they're wet, cold, hot, tired, overstimulated, understimulated, bored, hungry, frustrated, uncomfortable, they've got a dirty diaper, or maybe they just need to cry for some emotional reason, much like adults. We usually learn what a baby's cry means by trial and error most of the time. When a baby has a wet diaper, we can change them and they feel better. When a baby's hungry, when we feed them, they feel better and stop crying. When a baby's tired, if we can help the baby go to sleep, they might wake up feeling much more refreshed and ready for interaction. Sometimes we just need to be there and support our babies as they cry. When we've tried everything we know to do and the baby still cries, we can just hold our babies to support them. Of course, if we're losing our cool, it might be helpful to put the baby in their crib for a second and come back when we have better control of our emotions. When babies cry, they communicate to us that there's a need that needs to be met. When we respond, we help them to understand that they've been heard, that their needs are important, and they learn to trust that somebody will be there for them. They depend on the adults in their lives to meet their needs in the early months, and as time goes on, when they have had caregivers who've helped them meet their needs, they begin to take on more responsibility for meeting their own needs. By the time a baby is 4 or 5 months old, they might begin to become upset, and if their caregiver is not able to respond immediately, just hearing the caregiver's voice can help the baby become regulated again. The baby communicates a need by beginning to cry or get upset, and the caregiver responds back through talking or singing to the baby, and the baby's able to calm for a second until the caregiver can come take care of that need. In many cultures, there may be an age-related increase in crying from the 2nd or 3rd week onward, and then a decrease by the time a baby is 3 or 4 months old. There's still a lot of debate as to why that might be happening. So hopefully in the future, we'll get it figured out a little bit better. Baby nonverbal cues are another way that they can help us understand what their needs are. Babies can express engagement and disengagement through their nonverbal cues. In other words, babies may say, "I'm really interested in engaging with you," or "I've had enough. I can't engage any longer," through their cues. Cues of engagement might include things like smiling, making eye contact, maintaining a gaze with somebody, regular breathing, having a bright face with stable color, raising their eyebrows to show they're interested, reaching toward the caregiver, etc. Cues of disengagement might include things like a baby avoiding eye contact, turning away, lowering their eyes, beginning to yawn, hiccuping, even though that's not always a sign of disengagement. Sometimes they're just hiccuping. Beginning to grimace with their lips or their face, breathing fast, fussing, putting their hands out to block you out, beginning to make sucking movements, arching their backs, and maybe beginning to cry. We usually look for a few disengagement cues to know that the baby's had enough. Some of these signs are behavioral, and some of them are automatic and are controlled by the brain. These automatic signs are called physiological signs, and the baby can't actually control them. We know that a baby's physiological state is good when we see smooth and regular breathing, normal color on their face and body, and normal digestion patterns. We know that babies are experiencing stress when we see some of these physiological signs, like irregular breathing. So their breathing might be fast, or, maybe they might be holding their breath just a little bit. We might see changes in a baby's facial color, and that might include blotchiness, becoming pale, or maybe even having a flushed face. They might have issues with digestion, like gagging or spitting up, having a stomach ache. We might also see coughing or sneezing, yawning, hiccuping, and startling very easily. But some of those can just be normal things that happen with babies too, right? If we see spitting up and yawning with other stress responses, we might interpret it differently than if we only see it right after eating. After crying and nonverbal cues, cooing is one of the first ways that babies begin to communicate with their caregivers in the first month or two. These are vowel-like sounds that babies make, like ooh, ah. When babies begin to make these sounds, they're often reinforced by their caregivers, who often imitate them. And this encourages the babies to make those sounds even more. Babies who live in environments where their caregivers interact with them a lot and who talk to them a lot might begin cooing earlier than babies whose caregivers don't verbally interact with them much. At birth, babies can hear and discriminate all the speech sounds in all of the world's languages. And as they hear more and more of their own language, their hearing becomes more attuned to the sounds they hear all the time. And these are the sounds that they'll actually produce. Babies whose attempts to communicate are responded to will continue to develop their skills because they want to be effective communicators with you. By responding to them appropriately, you're helping them to learn how to communicate better and better over time. It's really fun to watch a baby move from cooing to actual babbling somewhere between 4 and 9 months of age. And it happens because they keep watching you and learning more about the meaning of communication and how to do it. A little before or around the same time that babies begin to babble, and babbling, that's when they repeat consonant vowel combinations in both short and long sequences, like ba, 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 ba. You might notice that babies will begin to look in the same direction that you look. And they're using you to better understand what they should be paying attention to. They're not that good at focusing their attention on what you're looking at in the beginning, but as they continue to practice, they'll get better and better. When babies are talked to a lot, they often will begin to babble more and more. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the baby change their tone of voice as they babble, and they might use intonations similar to statements and questions. So really, you might notice that their babbling sounds very similar to your talking in terms of the pattern of sounds. The amount of time that a baby spends in joint attention, which is looking at the same object or event that the caregiver is looking at, and whose caregiver talks about the object or event that they see. Those babies who spend that time in joint attention are able to maintain their attention longer, understand more language, talk earlier, and learn new words faster than babies who don't have as much opportunity to have those joint attention interactions. You should pay close attention to your baby as these skills continue to develop. Some things that babies do are very important, but are also easy to miss. You might notice that babies will begin to listen closer and respond to familiar words. For example, the baby might look at the spoon if the caregiver begins to talk about the spoon. All of this also assumes that you're talking to babies about objects that you're using on a daily basis, as well as those that you just use every once in a while. Babies might also begin to wave bye-bye or to respond to somebody who says bye-bye by babbling something that might resemble bye-bye back. You might notice that your baby's also listening very carefully to you as you have a conversation with somebody else. When you tell your baby to drink their juice, you might see that they do what you ask them to do. The baby might point to something to let you know that they want something. You can give your baby lots of practice with these skills by talking about objects you're using or they're using, and point to them as you're talking about them. Wave bye-bye when you're leaving or another person is leaving, and just asking the baby to do simple things. Or we can see as babies are transitioning from babbling to saying their first words sometime around 12 months of age, that there are other things that are happening with the baby as well. We notice that they follow our suggestions more, that they look at things that we're talking about, and they try to join us in conversation. As babies are beginning to say actual words, sometimes it's hard to understand them. Babies develop great strategies to help you understand. They might point to the object that they're talking about, or they might take you to show you what they're interested in. As you keep communicating back to your baby by using the baby's name often, talking and singing to your baby, using simple commands and gestures to help your baby understand and expand on what the baby says, you'll see them continue to blossom in their language development. Babies' first words are usually important people in their lives, like mom, mommy, or daddy, sister, animals like doggy, actions like bye-bye, and foods like milk, juice. The environment around a baby as they begin using words is exciting because there's so much to learn. By telling the babies and toddlers about the objects in their surrounding area, like this is a sink, we use it to wash dishes. This is an avocado tree, it grows the avocado fruit that we eat. We help them to expand their brains. We give them words for what they see. And the more words, concepts, and understanding about how things work, the more advanced their brains are going to be, and the better they'll actually do when they go to school. Once babies and toddlers begin to use words, it's almost like they get really excited about learning more words. Now they're beginning to be able to express themselves verbally, and they're motivated to keep learning new words so they can communicate what they want. If they're exposed to books, they might enjoy pointing to the pictures in the book so they can learn the words. They understand more words than they can actually say. As they continue to add words, it's almost like there's a snowball effect, and they start learning more and more words. You might hear them jabbering to themselves as they play, and even though we can't necessarily understand what they're saying, it's a lot of fun to listen to them and imagine what they're saying. They might begin using the word no a lot to express their independence and that they have power in what they want to do. We can gently support them by telling them what we want them to do, not what we don't want them to do. We know that young children understand language before they can actually produce it. And in fact, young toddlers will understand 50 words about 5 months earlier then they'll actually be able to say those 50 words. As we continue to reinforce toddlers developing communication abilities, we'll see that they might begin to use 2-word sentences at around age 2 to help you understand their needs. Me milk, for example, to say, I want some milk. You can keep expanding toddler speech by adding new words that they're not familiar with and helping them to learn how to use those new words. You'll see as children are learning to talk that they may overextend the use of a word. For example, they might use the word car for a car, a bus, and a truck. In their minds, they're all the same thing. But as they have more experience with them, and as we label them, this is a car. It's red in color. It has 4 wheels, and it's something that families drive in. And explain those concepts a little bit more, toddlers begin to refine their speech. This is a truck because it's big and tall. It has an area in the back where we can put things. A car doesn't have an area in the back like this. As we begin to help children understand the similarities and differences between things, they begin to develop an understanding of what it is, and they have an area in their brain that compartmentalizes all of this information. As they continue to develop their understanding of themselves as separate from others, toddlers will also begin to use more words to refer to themselves, like me, my, mine, I. This is an important milestone for young children, as they're also beginning to understand at a really primitive level that sometimes people have different wants and needs than they do. It's going to be a while before they begin to consider other people's wants and needs, but this is the very beginning of that point of understanding. One way that young children learn is called fast mapping. This is where a young child, and even a child as young as 2, will connect a new word with a concept after being exposed to it just one time. In one study, adults gave the name cube to a game in which the object for which it stood, which was, an oddly shaped plastic ring, was introduced only once. And even 2-year-old kids understood what cube meant. There is one thing about fast mapping. Kids sometimes have to refine their guess about what the word means because they might be paying attention to certain aspects of the word. And that mistake suggests that maybe some words are easier to fast map than others. Young kids learn labels for objects the fastest because those refer to concrete things that they already know about from exploring. Words for actions like go, run, jump are also added pretty quickly. And then modifiers, or words that describe features of objects and people like round, red, sad, are also added pretty quickly. But there's a breaking point for those modifiers. Say a 2-year-old already understands big and small. They probably won't be able to understand other words for big and small, tall or short, high or low, until somewhere closer to the age of 3 at least, and up to 5. So what contributes to children's language? There are so many factors that do. Shy children tend to talk later and less than other kids. They seem to wait until they know more words and feel more confident before they try to talk very much. Girls usually talk earlier than boys, which might be as a result of their early physical maturation, which results in earlier development of the left cerebral hemisphere. One of the very biggest predictors of early language development is the language environment of the child. If the child lives in a language-rich environment where people talk, sing, play, and read, they might have stronger language development. Children who are exposed to less words early on might have fewer words. Research in the US indicates that kids who grew up in poverty tend to have fewer words because people talk to them less. When poor children live in an environment where people talk to them more, they have more words. So it's not poverty per se, it's just the amount of language that people use. But in general, what research has found is that kids who live in high-income homes are exposed to more than 3 times as many words as kids who grow up in lower-income homes. How so? Children from low-income homes hear about 616 words per hour on average. Children from working-class families hear about 1,251 words on average per hour. And kids from professional families hear about 2,153 words per hour on average. The type of words that kids heard was different also. Kids in professional families heard an average of 6 positive words for every negative word. Kids from working class families heard 2 positive words for every negative word. And kids from poor families heard 2 negative words for every positive word. What does that mean? It means that a child from a professional home will hear an average of 30 million more words by the time that they're 4 years old than a child from a low-income home. The researchers followed the kids until they were 9 or 10 years old, and what they found was that the kids' language development at 3 years of age was highly predictive of their success in school when they were 9 or 10 in terms of their vocabulary, language development, and reading comprehension. In other words, the kids from the professional homes were set on a trajectory of success in school, and the kids from low-income homes were set on a trajectory of not doing as well. There are several areas of the brain that tend to be primarily responsible for language-related activities. For 95% of adults, the left hemisphere of the brain is the area of the brain responsible for language development, including both speech production and comprehension. But the right hemisphere is also involved and controls the emotional tone of language. Wernicke's area of the brain is responsible for receptive language and links words to their meanings. As Wernicke's area develops through exposure to language, it helps babies to begin to understand individual words. Broca's area is involved in expressive language or producing speech, including the structure of language like the word order. As Broca's area becomes more developed, again, partially through exposure to language, young kids become better at saying words and then putting them together into small sentences. We understand words before we can actually produce them, and that's because Wernicke's area of the brain develops before Broca's area of the brain. When infants are somewhere between 18 to 24 months of age, the connections between Wernicke's and Broca's areas become stronger, and that helps young children begin to put their words in the proper order a little bit better.